Welcome back to the foundry. So I hooked the Dodge up to a trailer for the first time since I bought it. Wasn't a heavy trailer, just a 20-foot deck over, light load. Just kind of wanted to see how it was going to pull. And, it did pretty good, but I did discover a minor issue that I need to address. So the issue I encountered is I'm unable to turn off overdrive. And that's very inconvenient when you're pulling a trailer. The 47RE transmission behind a Cummins, to make it downshift out of overdrive, like on a hill for instance, you really got to lay the hammer down, and it's just inconvenient. And so if you're going up an on-ramp or something like that, it'll tend to bog. Plus, it's not real good on the transmission to tow in overdrive unless you're on, very level ground or going downhill or something like that. So I'm suspect of the actual switch. I've encountered some issues with switches, like on my F350. The cruise control buttons were sticky, and I had intermittent cruise control failures. It took me a long time to figure out that it was actually the buttons. So this time I'm going to go to the button first. It's should be pretty easy to check. So I'm just going to take a screwdriver, and I'm probably going to have some difficulty doing this with one hand, but I'm going to, see how gunky that is? I really hope the switch just needs to be cleaned, but then I'm going to carefully try to, I'm not going to be able to do this one-handed, so I'm going to set this thing down, and I'm going to try to work this switch out like that. And the contacts themselves down in there, they don't look too corroded or dirty, nor do they on the switch itself. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a meter on the switch and see if the switch is working. I hope it's not. I hope this is my problem, because this would be an easy fix. I believe I could actually take this switch apart. The contacts themselves, these are just connectors. The contacts themselves are inside the switch, and I think all this button does is ground it. It's momentary, but I'm gonna get my meter, test it, and go from there. Well, I'm not getting out easy today. Tested for continuity across the two poles there when I push the button, and the switch does in fact work. So next I tested the wires. The top one should have 12 volts when the key is on. The bottom one should be grounded. So I put the meter on it. The bottom one is a solid ground. The top one is an open circuit. There's no voltage whatsoever and no ground. So just kind of looking around thinking, maybe I should look at the wires in the column. You can see I've already got the cover off here, and that's because I'm trying to get in here. If I pull this down a little bit, you see that pink up in there? That's two butt splices that appear to go to the wires that go through the shift lever. One of them is connected. Presumably that's my ground. The other one, it appears that the wire is broken at the butt splice, and I'll bet you anything that's my 12-volt wire. So then the question is, why are there butt splices in the column that goes to my overdrive switches? That seems kind of bizarre. That I may never get the answer to, because that's just what you get into when you buy a used truck. So next, I'm trying to get this cover off without breaking it. It's very brittle because it's a Dodge. So I think I'm gonna take this off, and that should give me more access to take that apart, hopefully without breaking it. If it does break, I actually have a line on a parts truck that's got a perfect interior. Of course, it's going to be brittle as well, so I don't know if that'll work out or not. But in short, I would rather have a functional overdrive system, overdrive off button, than I would a cover. So I'm going to go for it. So as I suspected, there are butt splices here that go, this is the shift shaft, and this butt splice was holding this wire in. It fell off when I took the cover off. This is the broken power wire. These two wires go down and connect down there. So what I'm going to try to do here, I'm going to go ahead and nip this splice off and pull the wires up out of this shifter, pull this switch base out, and run new wiring. If I can feed them up through there, it's going to be quite a little task, but I'm going to try to run new wiring. I'm going to have to see how it's attached to the back of the switch. It may be soldered. I don't know exactly what I'm going to encounter in here, but it's unfortunate that it's broke right there. It's too short to re-splice. So I'm going to have to do something. So I'm going to dig into this thing and see what I can come up with. All right, once the wire's cut, I pushed on it a little bit and brought the switch base out to here. And we're about to see how it's connected. So there's my broken wires. Connects in the back of that. So I'm wondering if I've got enough room to splice here. If there's enough room for butt splices up in there. I don't think there is. I'm going to have to look at this close. But anyway, I'm pretty confident that's my problem. If not, it was a problem that had to be addressed. I can take my meter now and see if I've got 12 volts at one of these wires. And if I do, then all I have to do is rewire this switch and I'm back on the road. If I don't have 12 volts, I've got to trace even further to see what's going on. All right, well, some good news. I do have 12 volts on this wire when the key is on. I've got a good ground on the other wire. So now it's just going to be a matter of rewiring up into the switch lever. And that's going to be tricky because these wires are tiny and there's really not a lot of room for butt splices. So I may have to solder them together or something. I'll have to figure something out. So this wire is super tiny, and I was only able to come up with a couple little pieces about 2 inches long. So what I'm doing is I'm bringing them in up to the switch base and soldering. See if I can get it to focus, not sure. And I'm soldering them together because there's no room in that handle for a butt splice. And then I'm going to use a heat shrink over it right here. So basically I'm extending the wires inside the handle by 2 inches. This wire will shoot another 2 inches out the base of the handle. That way I can attach it to the wire that's on the 2 wires that are on the truck. It's not an ideal way to go about it because that means, you know, I've got more splice points. I would ideally like to cut this and cut the ones at the truck and run a whole new section of wire through the switch handle. The problem is I don't have any wire small enough to go through the gear shift lever handle. I've only got these 2 white pieces, and they're even slightly larger than the factory, but they're the closest I could come up with. So I may be able to, I'm going to try this. If it doesn't work, I may be able to get online and order that pigtail wire harness for that switch. I don't know. I actually haven't looked. But, you know, I've got some time today to kind of tinker with this, so I thought I'll try to fix it myself first. If I'm confident in my repairs, I'll go ahead and put it back together and call it good. If not, I'll see if I can, you know, find a replacement harness. Alright, so that's kind of how I'm soldering them together. And then I slide the heat shrink down over the soldered part. I apply some heat from this little unit here, and it shrinks it up around the joint. And then to hold everything together so it doesn't try to bunch up when I feed this wire down through the shift lever, I just went ahead and added a heat shrink over the whole area where my 2-inch extensions are and where my solder joints are. This was extremely tedious. I had to solder the wires together. There just isn't room for butt splices because this handle goes up in there, and I'll show you how it works when I get this all put back together. But the short of it is I had to solder the 2 wires to the 2 wires in the gear shift handle. They're extremely tiny. I didn't have as much lead coming out as I'd liked, but you know, that's the way it is. So we'll just have to see how this how this holds up. And then I zip tied the wire up here to hold it, and we'll see how it works. I think it'll be okay if my solder connection stays tight. I had to put these zip ties and this mess on here because the solder connection ended up being kind of sharp after it dried. It was poking through my heat shrink. So all this is another layer of heat shrink that I split, wrapped around there, and zip tied, and hopefully that will eliminate the chance of any shorts. All right, I should be able to crank it up and have an OD off light when I hit the button. OD off. All right, let's drive it and see how it does. Alright, there's overdrive off. We'll pull out here and see how it does. First, there's second, third, and lockup. No overdrive. Now let's turn overdrive on. There's overdrive and lockup. Excellent. So that worked out pretty good. It's kind of a pain in the neck having to do all that soldering and whatnot, but such is life. So now I've got a couple little jobs coming up. I've got to pull a deck over trailer, and it'll be much more comfortable now that I can have control over overdrive, and it'll be much better on this transmission because 47 REs aren't something you want to stress any more than you have to. So overall, pretty happy with this little repair, and ready to put it to work. And I'll see you guys in the next one.